Okay, let's go. It's late. I still want to do more than an hour. The Rambam in Hilchot Talmud Torah speaks of the law of learning Torah and teaching Torah. And I heard from Rabbi Soloveitchik Shlita that the Rambam's view, which he holds as the basic view, is that it's forbidden to take money for teaching Torah or learning Torah. So therefore, according to this view, and it's not a universal view, but according to this view, which is a major one, it's prohibited to be in the profession of being a Rosh Yeshiva. And I'll read from the Rambam. This is Hilchos Talmud Torah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Zayin. Hoya min hakamadina mikach l'lamed echinot b'sachar. If it was the custom in the area for the one who teaches little kids to take money, don't take lo scharo, that's okay, to teach little kids. V'chayav l'lamdo b'schar. And you have to teach him, even pay for it, to teach your son. Ad sheyikra Torah sheb'ketav kula. Until he reads through the entire written Torah. Okay, so we're speaking here not about oral Torah, but about written Torah. Makom shenahagu l'lamed Torah sheb'ketav b'sachar. A place where it's customary to teach, again, written Torah with money, it's permitted. Mutar l'lamed b'sachar. Okay? So written Torah, there is no halachic question whatsoever. And Rav Soloveitchik said that was his excuse for taking a salary, because even his boys in his rabbinical class didn't know how to read, simply to read correctly the written Torah. Okay. So that's absolutely permissible. Avo Torah Shebal Peh, oral tradition, Osir V'Lamda B'Sachar. It's forbidden to teach it for money. Shene'emar. What is the biblical source for this? Behold, I have taught you chukim, statutes, and judgments, kasher tzivani Adonai, as God has commanded me. This is Deuteronomy 4:5. And the Talmud learns, just ma'ani b'chinam lo, just as I learned free. In other words, I have taught you like God commanded me. Moshe hands on the Torah as God taught it to him. How did God teach him? Free. God didn't take any wages. So Moses tells the Jews, you have learned for nothing from me. If you recall, he says toward the end of his life, did I take a cow from anybody or a sheep? Just as Shmuel does. So Moshe stresses that he never took a dime from any of the Jews, even though he spent his whole life teaching them. And this is how he learned from God. And so when you teach for other generations, teach for nothing, as you learned from me, Moses. So the Rambam quotes Talmudic passages that it's forbidden to teach for money. So this is learned from Moshe from Sinai. If you will find nobody who will teach you free, then you have to pay. Because it says in Proverbs 23, emes keneh, buy truth. The person is not supposed to charge you money. But if the situation is you have nobody who will teach you for nothing, so from your standpoint, pay the money. Yochol. And then, once I've paid money for my learning, I've invested so much to get my rabbinical degree. So therefore, I should teach others and get back the money at least that I expended. Yochol yelamed lachem b'sachar. Perhaps he should teach others for money. Talmud lomar v'al timkor. Buy truth, and then it continues there in Proverbs, and don't sell it. It's an object which you may spend money to acquire, but you give away for nothing. Polamanata, you have learned, the Rambam says, Sha'aser lo l'lamed b'sachar, it's forbidden to teach for money. Afapi, even though shelimdo rabo b'sachar, even though he had to pay money to his teacher to teach him. That's one law in the Rambam. Now, another one. Then he describes how one should divide his time of learning, how much he should learn, but that's not relevant for my purposes. Now, I'll skip, see if I can find it now. The Rambam later adds that suppose someone decides he just wants to learn and let charity support here. This is in Perek Gimel Halacha Yud. Kol hamasim al libo. Anyone who gets the idea, sheyasok b'Torah, that he will occupy himself with Torah, v'lo yaseh malacha, and not work, he's pardes tzedakah, and he'll get his income from charity, kolel, whatever. Harezu chil et Hashem. He profanes God's name. The Rambam is that emphatic. Someone who will be occupied with Torah. The first prohibition was on teaching Torah for money. Now the Rambam is speaking of something else. Not teaching Torah for money, but sitting with Torah, not making a living, and having others support you. This is disgracing God's name. Ubaza et HaTorah, and he disgraces the Torah. V'chiba le'or hadas, and he extinguished the light of religion. V'gara morali atzmo, and caused evil to himself. V'nata chayavin olam haba, and he's taken his life out of the world to come. V'fisha osir, because it's forbidden. Le'adot v'divri sorah olam haba. It's forbidden to derive any worldly benefit from the Torah. Aruch HaChamim, wise men said, Kol haneh v'divrei Torah, anyone who benefits from divrei Torah, no tel chayav min olam, takes his life out of the world. The old Sibu B'Yomru, they also added, Al ta'aseh ma'Torah l'yiskadel, don't make them a proud to glorify yourself in them, special protects your privileges, but you're a teacher of the Torah. Below Kardon Machmor, have another space to dig with to derive material benefit. The old Sibu B'Yomru, this is Pirkei Avot, of course. And they also said, Ahavat HaMalacha, love work, Usnot HaRabbanut, and hate the Rabbanut. The whole Torah.
It really says that?
Yes, in Pirkei Avot. Now, what they mean by the word Rabbanut, they probably mean some kind of high position or ruling power, but that's the exact word. Ahavat HaMalacha, Usnot HaRabbanut. The Rambam brings it here. The whole Torah, She'enim HaMalacha. I think it's just quoting Pirkei Avot here. First, it says Yofa Torah and Derech Eretz. Sama Torah and Derech Eretz. The combination of worldly occupation and knowledge with learning Torah is beautiful. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have it, it's ugly. The converse is where you go to the extreme that not only are you lacking Derech Eretz, are you lacking general human cultivation, but you don't even earn your own living. That's like the lowest level, the most removed from the world. So any Torah which doesn't have malacha, work, profession with it, sofa batela, in the end it will become negated. You'll lose that Torah itself. The Gorera Dovo, that Torah will cause sin, because you'll use the Torah in a desperate attempt to support yourself. The sof adam zeh, and the end of such a person, shehem alastim et abriyo, that he'll rob his fellow man. And how can he rob his fellow man? They'll solicit money for his yeshiva. And they'll claim the yeshiva is far more than it really is, because he really wants to get those donations. Or he'll convince people they must go to his yeshiva and no other, even though perhaps another yeshiva is better for him. Because the more pupils, the more money. And maybe they have a rich daddy, or whatever. So you can see practical applications of this law. Okay? Then the Rambam asks, Ma'ala Gedolahi, a great trade, great value, for the one who supports himself from the work of his hands. And the first saintly people, the early saints, early great rabbis, they used to work with their hands. With this he becomes worthy of all honor and good in this world, for the next world. The exertion of your hands, Kisota, when you eat, Ashrech of a Tova, 128th Psalm. You'll be happy, you'll be wealthy. Ashrech of Olam Hazeh, happy in this world, the Tova, the Olam Hazeh. Now, That's the Rambam's law in Mishnah Torah. Now I'd like to read you a letter which the Rambam wrote.
I have a question about that. How did the modern day Jews get away with it?
How do they get away with it? Basically, we had this discussion at Machon Lev in a recent seminar. I asked Professor Levy was on the discussion. And generally the opinion is it's only because of emergency situations. Since the Torah would be forgotten and people couldn't both learn and earn at some point around the Middle Ages, they decided that you're allowed to do it. Now there is a heter called schar b'tala. If you're, say, a surgeon who gets $1,000 an operation, you're about to go operate, and I say, I really prefer that you teach me about the balance. So I'm taking you away from your profession, and I can give you $1,000. So you see the Rambam has no such heter here. The Reb Soloveitchik explained that heter is only if I'm taking you to a very specific thing, but not as a general way of making a living. So therefore, the general practice of taking money for learning and teaching Torah is only justified the same way as writing down the oral law based on emergency. That we need people to learn Torah and Torah learning this week. We can't do both. So therefore, emergency thing. There's just no choice.
So they say now it's emergency for them to study all day?
Well, that's what I question. Today we have a different situation. We now have a situation of what we call learned professions, where you can become expert in some scientific realm, a consultant or something. Just work a couple hours a day and work that doesn't weary you, and get a pretty good salary. And if one lives very modestly, that's part of the Rambam's scheme. One lives very modestly, one can learn and teach a great deal.
But a lot of them don't even do that. They don't work a single
That's
day.
right. So what I'm pointing out is the same society where they're careful to have 2 pairs of stone often, that have both Rashi and Tom's view, and there might be more bias than either Rashi or Tom. And they're worried about all sorts of possible views in many realms. They should worry about this one. This is a real big one. The Rambam says, "Still Hashem and Bizayon HaTorah." If someone takes money for learning and teaching Torah. Now, this is a letter that Maimonides wrote in Cairo in the autumn of 1191 to Joseph ibn Acton, who was one of his people. All right? With regard to your journey to Baghdad, which you have mentioned, I do not oppose your intention of founding there a house of learning, yeshiva, base medrash, delivering lectures and making legal decisions. Very nice to be a Rosh Yeshiva. Always providing will be based on my legal code. I am afraid, however, that you will be perpetually involved in troubles with those people, and you won't be able to achieve any of your aims without great difficulty. Besides, if you devote yourself entirely to teaching, you will reduce your earning to nothing, and I cannot advise you to accept any reward from them. It is better for you to earn a drachma as wages for the work of a weaver, tailor, or carpenter than to be dependent on the license of the exile, the communal structure of finance and town. If you quarrel with them, you will lose. If you accept anything from them, you will humiliate yourself. My opinion is that you should pay full attention to your trade and medical practice, and at the same time continue the study of Torah according to the right method, by studying the halacha of the Rav and comparing it with my compendium. If you find any disagreement, you must know it's necessary to go back to the Talmud and try to find the relevant passages. If, however, you spend your time on commentaries and explanations of obscure passages in the Talmud, I must tell you that these are things which cause much waste of time and little gain. But whatever you may choose is your occupation. Let me know of it. May the Lord guide you to find the right way. This is another view of Maimonides, which is not compatible with much of contemporary Torah learning. That basically the Talmud and Mishnah were not clear documents. That the Mishnah was a shorthand used by great scholars only, and the average person couldn't understand it. So Maimonides went through all these difficulties and put down the law for everyone to read, so that they should not have to go through this whole difficult process, and just they should learn the law. And that's it, and know all the law as well. So there's 2 outstanding views of Maimonides in this letter. One, that one should earn one's living other than from one's Torah. No, he'd be a Rosh Yeshiva. And 2, that he should not spend much time on trying to figure out difficulties in the Talmud, because it's a waste of time. All right? So that's just something to start off with. Now, I thought what I would do, perhaps, is a bit of Parshat Haazinu. I don't think any of you were here when I began it, so I'll begin at the beginning. Haazinu, according to Rabbeinu Bachya, is one of the 4 last parshas of Devarim of the Torah, all of which were said on the day that Moshe died. Moshe had this grand finale where he did Nitzavim, Vayelech, Haazinu, and Zot Habracha. The last 4 sentences. Haazinu, in my opinion, directs itself to the very basic issues of life and religion. It's a poem. It's like a grand song of Moshe. Now, what's unusual structurally about Haazinu is it's the longest, I think it was 58 verses, the longest section in Sefer Devarim, 52. And it's only 1 chapter. Usually, parshas of the Torah have several chapters. If you want, there's Orthodox, I think there's another one there. It's interesting. It's chapter 32, which is what? What is chapter 32? What's 32 in Hebrew? Later. So somehow the idea that words that go from the heart are received in the heart is hinted in how the chapters of the Torah work out. But this is Moshe's perhaps most heartfelt, most heartfelt oration, Haazinu. So it's called Lave, chapter 32, heart. And I think it's the only Seder that consists of just 1 chapter. And that 1 chapter is entirely read in the Seder. And the 52 verses would indicate something else, which I thought of, but I saw that it actually is the simon. There's one thing missing from this. This is Moses, day of he died. Yoshua reads it with him, we see at the end. Who's missing? Huh? Aaron's there.
No, the leaders.
Who's the other leader besides Yoshua? Moshe, Yoshua.
They have a 1 from each of the tribes.
Yeah, but there's another main leader. Kole, right? That's the 52. The 52 verses bring in Kole, not finding in the background. Top is 20, Muhammad is 30, and continues. And I thought of this, then I saw that the simon that they actually give to remember the number of verses is Kole. So he should be there, and apparently, according to the Sukkim, Kole is more for where a chapter late, heart. Words that go from the heart come into the heart. 32 in the bar. It starts off, Moshe starts, Haazinu Hashemayim v'adavera, v'sishma ha'aretz nimrei fi. Hey, give ear, heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. Grammatically, what contradiction is there seeming to be between the first and second clauses of the first verse? Haazinu Hashemayim v'adavera, v'sishma ha'aretz nimrei fi. There seems to be a grammatical contradiction. One is plural. That's okay because the word Shemayim is used as a plural. The heavens, we even say it in English like that. The earth and the heavens. But there's another grammatical problem. What's the difference?
One is the command, one is the
Third person. One is second person, imperative. Listen, heavens, and the earth shall hear. Rashi, as Silverman interprets him, Rashi says it's just the style, and the tishma, basically, he says similar is the tishma ha'aretz. Meaning, according to Silverman, that the verb is like the imperative, but that's difficult, because where was he the tishma? I don't know. Rabbeinu Bachye has a very interesting comment, that this grammatical change is to teach us that Moshe is basically not a man of this world. Moshe is most comfortable in heaven. And to heaven he talks directly second person. When it comes to speaking to her, Moshe says, let the earth, Moshe doesn't address himself to her. That the Torah is giving a hint that Moshe is really out of this world. And if you recall, Moshe is the only human being described as really being out of this world. Stopping eating and drinking, leave alone separate from his wife, but not eat or drink for 40 days and so forth. So Rabbeinu Bachye says this is a hint of it, that Moshe is really the one person who sort of left this world. And he addresses it only in the third person.
Oh, can we also say that this is using heaven and earth as a witness to this speech?
Yes, but the question is, why does he address heaven in second person imperative, and earth, let the earth hear, just describes in third person? Well, Vidishma is not Ushma. He says, let the earth hear, not listen earth. He says, listen heavens. You're addressing them directly. Okay. Now, Rashi says, what does it mean that, first of all, he goes around talking to the heavens and the earth? How can you talk to them? Any comments on that? How can I, sounds very nice poetically, but how can I talk to the sky? Listen to it. Listen to it. Anybody know the simple answer to it? Simple answer, according to the Rambam, the ultra-rationalist, is that the heavenly bodies have minds greater than ours. The Rambam ascribes powers of thinking and feeling to the heavenly bodies. In Yaakov, something I think I read this. I think I got the original in time. It shows in the book, but it kind of has similar. Well, the Rambam has that idea, and Rav Soloveitchik pointed out where else do we see that idea in the prayers every Shabbos? Where do we see that there's actually feelings and thoughts to the heavenly bodies? Good. Where is that from? And what else does it say? Keladon, Yitzoram, Bavina, Yevaskel. Not that God created them with understanding and wisdom. That God has, of course, God has understanding and wisdom. God endowed them with. Smechim v'tzeisam. Not they cause to rejoice, but samchim v'tzeisam. They rejoice when they go out. V'sasim v'goam. And they're happy when they come out. So the prayer El Adon, which predates the Rambam, according to Rav Soloveitchik, if I remember correctly, about at least 400 years, has that notion that they have actually minds and feelings. I'm just trying to see if I have the source for you in the Rambam. Here, I found it. This is Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah, Perek Gimel, Halacha Tet. Kol HaKochavim, V'Hagalgalim, all of the stars and constellations, Kulam Balei Nefesh, they're all soul beings, Gedeo, and knowledgeable beings who really feel, grasp things deeply, V'Haskel, and understanding. V'Heim Chayim, and they live, V'Omdim U'Makirim, and recognize that Misha Amar V'Hoya Olam, Kol Echad V'Echad, each one according to his greatness and stature. Mishabachim, praise and afarim and glorify the Yotzram, their creator, like the angels. Okay? So that's the Rambam. And as they recognize God, so they have self-awareness. Makirim et Atzma, and they recognize the angels who are above them in the structure of reality. And the knowledge of the stars and the constellations is less than that of the angels, but more than that of each. So I thought that would be an interesting note. So one way you can interpret when Moshe says, heaven and earth should listen, he means it. He's making them witnesses, and they don't die so fast as people, and they have awareness. Rashi brings something else. Rashi says that, look at this, that heaven and earth, which have no free will basically, and get no reward and punishment, but they do God's will, so man should certainly do it who has reward, that they do God's will. That's one thing around. What is the idea of that? Wow. Because the heavens do God's will without a reward, no punishment if they disobey, therefore I should do God's will. It sounds corny. What does it mean? Now I would say that Hirsch, and one of his most basic ideas maybe is based on this Rashi. What is the idea of Hirsch? Hirsch says if there were no Torah, I would look for a Torah. This is in the 19 letters of Venezuela, as I recall. Why? Because as I look about me at the world of which I'm part of,
I see that everything in the world has a purpose, and that everything is related to everything else. We're one huge mechanism with ecological effects of everything on everything else. I look at the plant and the animal, and the sun and the stars, earth and heaven. I see that they're programmed. The earth is programmed to do its job, the plants, the animals, the stars. Everything is programmed to do its job, except for one thing, man. And I sense in myself almost an infinite variety of possibilities of free will. Man can be absolutely corrupt, and man can be absolutely noble. He can be Aryeh Levine, he can be Hitler. So when I see this, and yet I see everything has a purpose, and I have free will, so I must find a Torah someplace, Hirsch says. Someplace, the one who designed this whole mechanism had to leave me a book of instruction. Because I'm not programmed on automatic. So I would assume this idea, and therefore, when I look through human history, there is only one claim that God came down before everybody involved and gave a factory authorized instruction manual. That's our claim. The Christians and Muslims make no such claim. They don't say God came down to everyone involved. Boys, I've changed my mind. Even though I said this Torah is eternal, and the Jewish mission is eternal, I've changed my mind. They don't claim that. Why? Because you can't make up such a story. The Kuzari says this. You can't say God appeared to all of us and told us to keep this law and to repeat it to your children, because if someone would come and make up such a story, I'd laugh at him. My daddy never told me. If God had really done that, I would have heard about it before you came and told me. So we have such a story because it really happened. The Christians and Muslims have no such story. If God came down, boys, I've changed my mind. The Jews are no longer the chosen people, follow Jesus from on. They can't make up such a story because nobody would believe it. So, when Hirsch says we have to look for a Torah, and this is the only one around. And that, I think, is what Rashi means when he says that heaven and earth, I believe it's Rashi, I'm not sure, but the Medrash says that heaven and earth obey God's laws without reward and without punishment. So when man sees that, they're witnesses against him. What does that mean? When I see everything else in the universe working on automatic, by laws of God, not sporadically, and interacting with everything else. So I know everything has a role in the universe. So I must seek out the Torah. And if I have a Torah and disobey it, so heaven and earth are witnesses to me that I am destroying the whole world because I'm not fulfilling my function. Okay? That's how I would interpret this first verse. Then he says in Bays, Yaakov Fogelman, let my doctrine, drop down like rain. Tizal Gatalim Rasi, and my words drip like dew. Kisilim alei desha, according to Rashi, like stormy rains. Rashi interchanges the sin and the samach here. And in explaining Yarov, Rashi takes an example instead of ayin reish pei, where you have reish ayin pei. Okay? So besides Hirsch's getting his basic idea of Torah from this Rashi, I think Hirsch also gets some of his linguistic methods from these Rashis on Haazinu. The interchanging of a sin and samach, okay? And the interchanging of the order of letters. So Hirsch, who I consider maybe our greatest teacher for the Torah, I think is expounding ideas of Rashi here that man basically must seek the Torah because everything else in the universe is programmed to do its job and he's not. And Hirsch may get some of his basic grammatical ideas out of these Rashis. Now, so Rashi says, Kisirim alei desha is like strong stormy rains on grass, Ukirvivim light rains alei esav, on other types of rain. Vegetables and trees, Rashi says desha here, means big plants. Big plants can take real stormy rain, and it's good for them. It's sort of the equivalent of exercise for the plant. Yeah. We have the notion that if I lift weights all day or run 10 miles, it hurts. It's uncomfortable. It's bad. No, it's good. Because you become stronger through doing that. So Rashi says heavy rains, plants which the wind bends all the way back to the ground again and so forth, actually are a blessing because that challenge strengthens the plant. This is Rashi's notion of bhakti. Whether it's correct scientifically, I don't know, but we can hear the moral idea that's trying to be expressed here. And certain things, grasses, if they have a heavy rain, will be destroyed. So Moshe describes his teaching as 4 different kinds of rain. Regular rain, dew, stormy rains, and very gentle rains. What's the idea of that? That it's the idea that's found in the Haggadah by the 4 sons. That all teaching has to be geared, just as God gears rains for certain plants and certain growths. So, the different types of rain here indicate, as Rashi expounds them, the idea of giving each what it needs. Now, the background to this is a very unusual one. Well, just let me change the subject a second. God forbid, let's picture we're dying. And those who we're closest to are all around us. What would you discuss with them? Your family, your friends, your pupils. They're all around your bed. You're lying there dying. What would you do? What do you think you do?
Now, I remember that you're supposed to give sacrifice at a time like that because there will be good reasons to give sacrifice.
All right, you say what Moshe is doing here. This is Moshe's death day according to Rabbi Bachman. Just picture this. You want to say some nice words of love, some words of friendship, apologies if I did anything wrong, what life is all about. Moshe's there bawling them out as he lays dying. Do we have a precedent? Did Moshe have a precedent for that? Where else do we have Jewish ethical will before Moses? By the way, that's the course I think I'm going to do soon. Jewish ethical will. Huh? Jacob, Yaakov. Yaakov's lying there dying. He calls his sons. They're all to deathbed. Hey, you're no good. Can you imagine that? He says, Reuben, Levi, and Shimon, your anger is fierce. You should be scattered. Reuben, you didn't retain respect for me. You're not fit to be firstborn. After that, he praises the others, sort of, Yehuda and Levi. Not Levi, Yehuda and so forth. He praises them. But first he starts with calling some out. So Yaakov is the precedent for using the moment of death as a moment not of making a nice, peaceful, harmonious scene, but of blowing them out, making them uncomfortable. Why? Because true love is more concerned with the welfare of the person you love than how they feel about you. A parent who loves their child may make that child at times hate them even. You've got to do your homework. You've got to brush your teeth. You've got to go to bed at a certain hour. I don't want to. You're mean. You're cruel. Now, if I want a nice climate of feeling with my child, I will say, I'll do whatever you feel like. You want to stay up? Stay up. You want to eat a candy bar? Eat a candy bar. So I will gain warm feelings, but I will not really be loving him. As it says in the Bible, he who withholds the stick hates his son. Very interesting idea. It's not an American contemporary idea. The American idea, unfortunately, is are you happy? Do you feel good? Does this feel nice to you? That the standard for what is worthwhile is not what objectively fits into God's plan, which we just discussed, what benefits the rest of the world and fulfills your mission, but the standard is, how do you feel at the moment, as though my feelings are so important to reality. And Reb Soloveitchik discussed this as the main problem of the Jewish religion today, that Western society, especially American, looks at religion as an aesthetic realm rather than a scientific. An aesthetic realm means that which gives me nice feelings when I encounter it. You go to a synagogue or church so that you feel pleasant and harmonious and peaceful. Okay? That's an aesthetic experience, like listening to a Beethoven's Ninth, the Ode to Friedman, or going to an art museum. It makes me have nice vibrations. Judaism, he says, is not like that. It has that. But it's primarily scientific. And in science, my feelings are irrelevant. If I look at the Golden Gate Bridge, there's a scientific component to that bridge. The tensile strength of each cable must be very exactly calculated. If it's wrong, the bridge falls down. It has nothing to do with my emotions whatsoever. There's also the emotions of going across the Golden Gate Bridge. Some people think, what a wonderful thing, man's triumph over the harshness of nature. Somebody else with a backpack is walking over and says, oh, how horrible man is ruined nature. But those are subjective, the aesthetic feelings. What's objective is the scientific construction of the bridge. Now, if God looked in the Torah and created the world, if this world, if reality and the Torah are to go together, so the Torah must also have, perhaps as its prime component, science, meaning exact details. And if you go a little bit off, the whole structure falls down. When Reb Nachman of Breslov says all the world is a narrow bridge, you could very well compare it to my analogy of the Golden Gate Bridge. If you don't make it exactly right, it falls down. Forget your feelings. Your feelings are irrelevant. You do things right, you will get good feelings, the feelings that come out of being right, out of fitting into God's plan and not going after your heart, your feelings and your eyes and your senses. So this is our main task as Orthodox Jews, to explain that religion is not just a matter of good feelings and aesthetic reactions, but it's a matter of scientific laws governing man's action, which are as exact and abstract and perhaps none related to my feelings as the laws of physics and biology and chemistry and so on. So Moshe, on his deathbed, bawls the people out as Yaakov did. It's true, he ends with Zot Habracha, and that explains a very funny Rashi. Rashi says in Zot Habracha, the beginning of the last section, which we're going to read on Simchat Torah, Rashi says, why did he do it as he lay dying? If not now when? Of course, he lay dying, he's giving a blessing. What Rashi means is he didn't want to give a blessing. He wasn't interested in nice feelings. But what he wanted to do was to try to use the impact of his death. And a person's death wishes are respected. So he wanted to use that impact to make the people better, to make them do their job. They won't like him, so they won't like him. He's more concerned that they turn out good than that they like him. But still, if not now when, he also wants to bless them. And Moses' blessing has power and impact. So Moses has three sedras, Nitzavim, Vayelech, and Haazinu, where he bawls the people out. Then at the very, very end, he gives them a blessing after they've been good. But what's the danger when you bawl someone out? They think you're doing it not for their good, but because you hate them. So you have to always show that you love them. So that would explain the second verse here. When Moshe calls nature as witness against them and bawls them out, at the same time he says, let my words come down like all the types of rain. That I'm doing this for a constructive purpose. When I'm harsh, it's because I feel I can be harsh. With some people, you have to be gentle. So that's the second verse. Okay. Then the third verse, Kishem Hashem Ekrah, Moshe says, I'm not praising God just to have my sublime experience. Remember, Moshe gives up his great experience with God. When does he do that? When he's standing with God on Har Sinai. Imagine that, he's with God, communicating with God. And God says, guess what? The people down there, he hears a noise. They're in trouble. They're making the golden calf. So Moses gives up his intimate religious experience with God, the highest man can find. Nobody ever achieved what Moshe achieved. To go down and deal with people who are worshiping a golden calf. And this is a basic Hasidic teaching too. To pull the wagon out, you have to get your feet dirty in the mud. And it's been a Jewish teaching. Rav Aviner, I went to Shirim this morning in Time Yeshiva. Rav Aviner mentioned that Moses got all that he got only for the Jewish people. The Jewish leader doesn't look, as the Christian leader often does, that he's having this great religious experience for his great experience. He's having it so he can give it to the people. And as I just mentioned, the Rambam brings very specifically, as God gave it to him for nothing, so he has to pass it on for nothing. And the basic law, barring emergencies, is that no one is allowed to take a dime for learning Torah or teaching Torah. The Rambam says it's a Torah Hashem. So Moses has to point out to them that he's doing it like rain on the ground. God brings a harsh, stormy rain, Rashi says, and the tree bends way over. But the net purpose is to make that tree stronger. So Moshe says right away, I'm only doing this because I love you. But it's important. What do we learn from this? Well, we give chastisement to our own children and pupils. or each other, wives and husbands. It always has to be conveyed, we're doing it out of love, not out of anger. And because if it's sense that you're doing it to express your anger, people will not accept it. And Reb Soloveitchik said this regarding Orthodox Jews in general. He said that the reason that other Jews don't keep the Torah often is not because they're bad, but because we are. That we don't set an example of such superior people. So they don't see that an Orthodox Jew is that much better. So when we see other people are not keeping the Torah, rather than throwing stones at them on the remote road, we should think, why aren't we inspiring enough? Now, and he says the purpose of his religious experience, when I call the name of God, is to arouse the people to attribute greatness to our Lord. You have the two terms here, Hashem and Elokeinu. This is always read around Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time. What do we end Yom Kippur with? Anybody? Hashem Elokeinu. You're really with it this hour. How many times do we say it? 7. Now, is that anticlimactic? What did we say before Hashem Elokeinu? Shema Yisrael. What more can you say than Shema Yisrael? Well, God is our Lord. Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem Echad, He's one. He's at back of this whole plan. Then Hashem Elokeinu. What does it mean even? Hashem Elokeinu. What does it mean? There's Hashem and there's Elokeinu. We say they're the same. Hashem Hu Elokeinu. That's apparently the big message that we're proclaiming, which adds something perhaps to Shema Yisrael. So I recall one of the nicest passages I ever read from Shimshon Raphael. Eila Barecha ve'Eila Basusi v'anachnu b'shem Hashem Elokeinu Tzadkim. Right? These people trust in horses and chariots, and we, in the name of Hashem, mention Elokeinu. So again, there's two entities, Hashem and Elokeinu. What's the difference between them? What is the word Elohim? Hashem or Elohim? What is Elohim? Elohim in Gematria is 86, which is what? Hateva. What is Hateva? Nature. You know, the modern people, they don't like to talk about God, so they always write nature with a capital N. I think that's one of the biggest disgraces in Jerusalem. If you go to the Museum of Natural History here in Chaldea, they don't mention God. Imagine the Jewish people have a museum about creation. The word God isn't mentioned because they copy the rest of the world. They mention nature with a big N. That's a euphemism. You can't say God, you have to say nature. So anyway, Elohim is Hateva, nature. It means God operating through the laws of nature. What do the laws of nature tell you about fighting a battle? What do you do when you fight a battle according to the laws of nature, according to Elohim, not Hashem? What do? You shoot with what? Whatever you got. That's called hishtadlus. That you just do a token gesture. Well, so the verse is difficult. They rely on horses and chariots. That means we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't have phantom airplanes. We shouldn't have missiles. We should maybe take a big stick and go out waving it and saying "till them" and then start hitting the letter.
We need to carry the broken tablets in the ark.
All right, but what are we supposed to do when it comes to war? Are we supposed to get phantom jets or not? So if you read Rebbeinu Bachye, the translations I'm doing a few parshas ago, he says God isn't going to do a thing for you if you don't have the phantom jets. Rebbeinu Bachye was a mystic and a Kabbalist, and he says you must get the very best weapons and make the very best plans. So what's Eila Barecha ve'Eila Basusi? We also use Rechav and Susi. We also have a Merkavah. So Hirsch explains it beautifully. Of course you have to use Rechav and Susi. That's Elohim. That's God's laws of nature. And you must obey God's laws of nature the same way as God's laws of the Torah. They're one. But we recognize there's more to God's will and something beyond Elohim. There's Hashem, where God's personality and his interrelationship with us directly intervenes and can even go against the laws of nature. We must do everything within nature, but once we have, even though nature says we've got to lose, we can win. An example, 1948. By all laws of military science, by all laws of war, We had to lose against all those trained Arabs with the British helping them and so forth. What we did was silly by Elohim, by the laws of nature. Yet, Anachnu Hirsch says, B'Shem Elokeinu, B'Shem Hashem Elokeinu Naskir. We mention Elohim, and we do everything like other people do us for Elohim. We have phantom jets, and we inoculate people against disease, and we watch our water for its purity and so forth. But we remember that all of that is just sort of a shadow world. And beyond it is Hashem. And Hashem and Elohim are one. And then if one gets deep enough into Torah, into his own soul, there's two parts. Asher Nasalo Torah Semes, who's given us a true Torah. And there's plenty of eternal life within us also, not in the Torah. So if one does both parts, one can suddenly see God in the laws of nature. Not just Elohim, but see God's love and God's personality in the midst of nature. And the early Zionist pioneers, Rav Kook and Rav Soloveitchik both said the same thing. At the same time, they were anti-religious. They would make a party on Yom Kippur. These were the most deeply religious people in the world. Because the thing they did was absolutely insane from a secular standpoint. After 1900 years, to go back to the Mideast, where there were Arabs and malaria and desert, no experience in government, no experience in army, no common language, so Ben Yehuda did it. And to think it would work, you'd have to be crazy. Unless you had a deep faith in God and the Torah. God said it will work. You try everything you can, Elohim, and then God will make his miracle. So both Rav Soloveitchik and Rav Kook said these were deeply religious people who may have had more faith than the Jew in Borough Park who kept every mitzvah done 3 times a day. It's Rav Soloveitchik's book, Chamesh Drashot. But it was a faith, like a love-hate relationship, which they repressed and supplemented through seeming secular disguise. So this is another theme of these segments. Now, Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. When we're dealing with ultimates, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you have to bring up the question of theodicy. In the back of everyone's mind is, how can God create a rotten world? And the Holocaust is not a special question. Any baby suffering, anything going wrong, a piece of rotten fruit on a tree, anything wrong in this world questions the idea of one God who cares. So therefore, Moshe states right away, Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. We'll go about another 10 minutes. The Sur, the foundation of the world, Tamim Pa'alo, his work is perfect. He's Holder Rachav Mishpah. All of his words are justice. El Amunah, he has faith. Even when a very bad person does one little good thing, Hitler pets a cat, God gives him his reward for that. But even when the tzaddik does one little thing off, he gets it. God sees all, responds to all. He ain't Ovel. There's no badness in him. That's how Rashi interprets it. Tzaddik v'yasher hu. God is righteous and he is straight. So if God is so straight, how come the world is so crooked? So that's the question. The next verse. Hey, Shiches lo. That should be read with a question mark. Is corruption, Kabbalah, are the bad things of the world lo to him to be attributed to God? Lo, no. So where do they come from? Vanav Numa, the imperfection is in his children, meaning us. Dor Ikei Shukasal. A very perverse and crooked generation who's not going in the straight path. Halashem Tikkun Zot. Is this how you repay God for all the good he's done with you? Am Naval, a perverse people, below Chacham, and not wise. Hello, Hu Abicha. He's your father. Will a father hurt a child? Konecha, the one who acquired you. Hu Ascha, he made you. V'yechonecha, and established you. So if God makes this whole system and wonderful world, would he do bad to his children? Would he do bad to his products? Well, you see, the whole world's designed to take care of his products. Our food, our air, climate, everything we have. So it can't be. So if you look back in history, you see how people messed it up. So the theme of Haazinu is people have free will, and they have to learn from heaven and earth that everything has a function, as Hirsch says in the 19 letters, and we must look for a Torah. At the same time, our work in this world is not just the Torah, but Torah and Derech Eretz. And if there's things wrong in the world, the imperfection is in the human being because he's created again with free will. Free will is a basic theme of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and of these severs and something by Haazinu and Zot Habracha. Since we have free will, we have to have the ability to mess it up. Man has to have the ability to ruin his life in every possible way, including the Holocaust. And God does not intervene. To the extent even in Gemara Chagiga, it's page 3 or page 5, near the beginning, there's a Gemara that says sometimes the Malach HaMamas makes mistakes. But their own guy gets killed, and God does not retract it. God makes it up in the next world. We have the notion clearly that the soul survives this world, and there is another world. This world is given over to free will. Free will presupposes that you can make mistakes. So the corruption, the badness in this world is the imperfection of his children. And we can give very concrete examples. Almost all diseases which man has worked on in the age of science have been cured. Polio, and so on. If we put a huge effort in. If we don't, there's no cure. So it's like a treasure hunt. God puts all the cures to all the problems in the world in the Torah. But he doesn't put them in front of you. Asher bara Elokim la'asot. God made the world for man to do and finish. Plus, na'aseh odom b'tzalmeinu. Let us make man our image. Who's God talking to? Rashi brings the Midrashim and say he's talking to the angels. To teach us everybody should consult. Don't judge by yourself. Even God consults to teach us. Rav Soloveitchik has another interpretation, which I think is even more beautiful. It's my text. Na'aseh odom b'tzalmeinu. Let us make man in our image is directed to man himself. You and I will make you. I don't make you complete. Again, you're not programmed. You don't work by intuition like all the other parts of the universe. I give you a Torah and a soul, and you have to develop them. So you and I shall make you in my image, to be godly. To be an animal, you can work on instinct and automatic. Your rate of breathing, your pulse, your blood flow, all works on automatic, like any other animal. But your image of God does not work on automatic. You and I together will make you on that. So these verses, in my opinion, are the Torah's approach to theodicy, the problem of the evil in this world being compatible with a God. And the answer is a very clear one. We have free will, and as long as mankind spends a lot more money on smoking cigarettes than on cancer research, cancer probably won't be solved. But God has put a solution to cancer in the world. Now, without believing in God, and not only God is existing, which even an idiot knows, atheism is stupid. It says in Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbat, praise God for the creation. Ish ba'ar lo yedah. An empty person doesn't know that, doesn't really feel it in his bones. Uchasil lo yavin esos. A perverse person won't understand that. But the harder problem is not that God exists, but that he cares. Cares about what happens to me, cares what I do. So if there is no God who cares, there's no reason for science. Why should I assume that there are laws? Why should I assume there's a cure for a disease or a solution for a problem? If the world is an accident, a Darwinian, Freudian accident, mutations, no reason to assume that there's anything to solve any problem if there's any law. It's just a mishmash. And Galileo and Newton, as I recall, both said that they did their scientific research, which at that time was very pioneering, because they believed in God. And they believed in a God of order and laws. So there's order and laws to look for. So that's what these verses, in my opinion, deal with. And then man, after contemplating the nature of the universe and his own role in it, and the problem of the evil in life, then he has to go back to human history. And we start our prayers similarly. Blessed are you, O God, Elokeinu. The first step is he's our God. Man must find his own God. My Father can't give me my God. I must explore. Rav Soloveitchik says that the Torah says, you will find God when you search with all your heart and soul. He said a person can be completely observant, pray 3 times a day, never make that search and never find God. That every generation, every person has to, with his mind and heart, explore and search for God. So, but still, after we say Elokeinu, which comes first, like in Haazinu, then we say Elokei Avoseinu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak. But how do I know that this whole pursuit of God can work? That I can actually establish a relationship with God? That I can acquire, so to speak, rights in God? I know it because Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov did it. And Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in Kabbalah represent the three basic personality types in man. Abraham, the outgoing personality, who achieves his destiny by relating to everything and everybody outside of himself. That's called Chesed in Kabbalah. Yitzchak, Gevurah, the person who also builds and achieves, but by going inward and withdrawing from the outside world and building great structures of discipline and abstraction within himself. Both fail with one of their sons. And the synthesis of Chesed and Gevurah, Tiferes, or Emes, which is Yaakov. And Yaakov succeeds. And if you recall in Zot Habracha, we have Yaakov described as Chevel Nachalato, or it's Haazinu, I forget which, the rope of his inheritance. And Rashi explains there, Yaakov is called a rope because it's like three strands put together which are stronger. He has Abraham, he has Yitzchak, but they both fail. They're not such a strong rope. Abraham loses Yishmael, and Yitzchak he loses Esau. But Yaakov is the threefold rope of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that becomes Yisrael, and he holds all his children, and they go on to form the Jewish people. But part of our religious experience is that experience must be Zechor Yemot Olam, to look back in history. How far do I look back? To the very beginning of creation. Binu Shenot Dor Vador, looking at the years of each generation. Shal Avicha v'yagetcha. Ask your father and he shall tell you. Zekenecha v'yamulah. And your Zaken and your teachers will tell you. When God gave the nations inheritance, when he separated people, when is that? When did God separate people? Tower of Babel. No, he didn't separate people then. He separated them and gave them their inheritance at the Tower of Babel. Okay, confused their language. Yatsev Gebulos Amid, he established the borders, and we'll finish with this point. He established the borders of the nations. Lemispar B'nai Israel, according to the numbers of B'nai Israel. What in the world does that mean? Rashi says he established the 70 nations and kept them alive only because 70 Jews who went down to Mitzrayim with the mountain. Rashi says the 70 Jews who went down with Yaakov to Mitzrayim correspond to the 70 nations. Two quick questions, and this will be enough for tonight. One, why did he keep the people of Tower of Babel alive to do that? The people of the flood were better. They didn't rebel against God. They were just loose livers, but they didn't rebel. Second question, what connection is there between 70 nations and 70 souls of the Jews? What idea is expressed here? I would say, this is from Reb Soloveitchik, the first idea. He said the flood generation did not rebel against God, but they became absolute prisoners of their primal drives, like the drug addict, person who's an alcoholic, whatever. And theirs was a generation which sank into depravity. They were nice people, maybe. The drug addict who robs the old woman is not a bad person. He may be a very nice person, but he's driven by his drives. He no longer has control of himself. So God said, this man is no longer a man. He's an animal. And this just has to be wiped out because it's perverted. However, the Tower of Babel, even though they openly rebel against God, but these are people of discipline. These are people of order who build to the sky. And Reb Soloveitchik said the flood generation is like the West today. Man goes out on his own after the Garden of Eden. He winds up in licentious depravity, like the West, or an arrogant power, like the communist bloc. The Tower of Babel is like Russia. The American astronaut goes out in space and the beginning got created heaven and earth. The Russian cosmonaut goes out there, I don't see God. It's innate in their system to try to topple God from heaven. Okay? So, but still, no matter how evil that person is, he's not animal, he's human. He has evil talents, but he's self-disciplined, he's ordered and directed. From that person, if you can give him good goals, he can build a world. And the Midrashim say Abraham or his descendants were the Tower of Babel. Rev Hadari mentioned once at the Shiva Tekota, I heard a shir, that sure you can build a tower to heaven, it's good, and we did it. What's it called? Beis HaMikdash. Is to reach God in heaven. But not to conquer God, but to join with God. But you can turn around that building of Tower of Heaven to conquer God and make it to join with God. So that God saves. From the Tower of Babel, he builds the Jewish people. And then my only answer to the other problem, what then is 70 nations and 70 souls of Jacob, that each culture has a mission and something to learn in this world. And we're finishing Sukkot where we bring 70 bulls to show that we do relate to and pray for universal mankind, for the 70 basic cultures. And that our Jewish people is to incorporate them all. This is my idea of Galut. The Yemenite Jew brings the beautiful things of the Yemenites. The German Jew brings the exactness and precision of German society. The American Jew brings American pragmatism. The British Jew a certain style and manners. And we all come together in Israel, and we help each other to get rid of the extremes of each of these cultures, which is what's called the Zora. And we put it all together in the model man, and this is Rev Kook's vision, I think, of Kingdom Seal Days and Torah Hashem and Shalom. That we build model man of body and spirit here in Israel by our bringing together all 70 nations. That's what Rashi says. Again, you get Hirsch and Rev Kook and so forth from Rashi. That the 70 souls of Jacob have to correspond to the 70 nations, meaning as they go into Galut, into Mitzrayim, they are to pick up the great things of every people, put it all together, and be the model people to bring the whole world back to where it was before Adam messed it up. Keeping Seal takes a Torah, Devar Hashem Yerushalayim, that's enough for tonight. Yeah, we have a double thanks to the folks who make this place possible, and to Mr. Dr. Reuben Ben Dov, who started this program and moved it to the Israel Center when it started. Yes, I always try to mention the center, and I don't think it's like the greatest thing. Wonderful. That's the way out.
There's nothing else on tonight.
Oh, there's things in other places, but that's I think the end of here.